Welcome to Becoming Fearless, the personal growth podcast for you if you are ready to overcome fear and step into your greatness. Our purpose is to help you overcome your limits, have loads of fun along the way, unlocking your fullest potential in life, business, health and relationships every single day. I'm your host, Charlotte Carter, a high-performance coach and entrepreneur with over 20 years' experience. I've supported many highly driven, talented people like you who dream big and are ready to take action to overcome what's holding them back. Each week, my guests and I will be sharing hacks and habits on how to build self-belief, courage and confidence to master your mindset and navigate your emotions so that you can reach your human potential in a way that feels light, fun and easeful and helps you become fearless. Let's go. Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Becoming Fearless. I am delighted to bring this guest episode to your ears. It is with somebody who's absolutely phenomenal on multi levels. But the first time I met this lady, I think a number of times we have had quite a good time, a lot of laughs and a lot of fun. And it's just been like a joyous connection from the moment that we connected. So I had to bring Annie on to share her journey, her view of life and how she is becoming fearless day by day, so that you can hear somebody else's very different perspective. So Annie, let people know a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Hello, Charlotte. Oh, it's so lovely to be here. It's lovely. Who am I? I'm Annie Bennett. My story is sort of long and convoluted, really. It's got so many parts to it. And this year it changed quite dramatically. But I was 30 years a primary teacher. And in the end, I was a head teacher as well. That ended not brilliantly, but, that's all I need to say about that, really. And that it was at that point that I then set up my baking business, Leading Lady Cakes. So named because I'm also a trained soprano and I sing. So I set up my baking business, doing some supply teaching as well along the way to, while the business was building. And then in 2020, we know what happened in 2020. All my wedding income went. And so I had to pivot. So that's when I set up what's now called the Home Baking Business Academy. And I teach bakers how to set up and run a business from home. And that is getting quite successful now. I've got quite a few bakers in my free Facebook group. I've got a membership that's building and so on and so forth. So it was all going along quite nicely until April this year, when the story dramatically changes.
So let's just hold you there. Hold you there before we go into the story. Let's just, because we will talk about the story. It's a big part of, sharing your mission for certain. So let's go back to you being a teacher and like you in that role, because you had that role for 30 years. So there's a lot of people that are my listeners, Annie, that have been in something for like decades and just think, do you know what? I've got to change this. It's just not lighting me up. It's just not feeding my soul. It's just something, but it's what I've always done type of feeling. What do you think? I know you said, it changed in a different way, but what do you think you, maybe 25 years in or whatever, when you started to realise that it wasn't necessarily what you wanted to do, what fears do you think came up for you in that space that allowed you to just jump?
Oh, goodness. It's a very difficult one when you're in a job or a career that brings in a regular income and you've got a mortgage, you've got children, you've got all the responsibilities. And I know I see lots of teachers now saying, I want to leave, but I don't know if I can financially. And that was the big one. I was around that time getting divorced as well. So I was becoming a single parent, lots of implications like that. But it really was a case of if I don't do it now, it's going to become more difficult to do it in the future. And there was an element of, well, I'll do it and I won't let it fail. It's a non-negotiable. It's not, what if this and what if that? None of that. no, it's got to succeed. And part of my sort of the way I am is, if things go wrong or there's mistakes or whatever, you learn from them and you move on. You move around the barrier that's been put up either by you or by anything or anyone else, and you work out how to get around it. So it really was a case of, okay, I've got to do it. I didn't make a clean break because I did the supply and I did sort of filling in and temporary things. But that was a means to the end. That was a means to, I want to be full-time with my baking.
And I think that's important for people, isn't it? It's like for some people like me, it's a full-on leap. Let's just leap head first without any safety net. Yeah. Let's just go all in. Yeah. For some people, it is that phase to actually, this is, and a couple of my clients are in this space, this feels good. This is like my halfway gap, halfway step to where I'm going to this being full-time. And there's no judgment and there's no right or wrong. You've got to do what feels right for you. But definitely if you're listening and you've got some inkling that what you're doing isn't the right path, keep listening for certain, because you realise that please make the choice that feels great for you. But also understand that nobody else is in your shoes. Nobody else will follow the path. People have their own guidance, but really you're your biggest guide. So let's then talk about this. When it first came out, it was Leading Lady Cakes. I love that. I didn't know that about you, the old soprano bit.
Did you know?
I've got my throat going. Let's talk about the leading legs. Talk people through about like the first time you started all that. And I know today's a pivotal day because you're baking your last cake. So this is interesting times.
I am.
Talk about the beginning of that, where you were.
Well, I was a head teacher at the time, and things had gone a little bit awry. I wasn't very well. My marriage was breaking up. All those kind of things were put together. And so I ended up, very long story short, I ended up leaving head teaching quite suddenly. But I had some time to sort of recuperate a little bit because it was an awful, awful time. And I remember sitting in my living room thinking, what shall I do? There's a few things I could do because I have a few skills in different areas, but I'd love to run a business. That's what I'd really love to do. But what? And I've always loved baking. I bake things. I used to bake things for staff and take them in. And, I'm always baking and feeding people. So I thought, that would be really lovely to set up a baking business. And wouldn't it be lovely to make wedding cakes? That would be just fabulous. I would love that. But at that time, I didn't know how to do that. I'd never made one. So it was a case of, okay, well, I know how to bake, but I've got to learn all the other things. So when I started my business, I was baking for markets. I was doing lots of farmers markets, which I absolutely loved. They're wonderful, wonderful places. And so, I'd be supply teaching generally through the day, baking in the evening, and then spending weekends at the markets. So it was full on. It was really quite full on. But because I had an end in goal, that's where my energy came from. This is changing things. So that's where my energy came from. So I did that for quite a while. And then I went on courses and I invested time and money learning how to create wedding cakes, how to make sugar flowers, how to, do royal icing and piping and all those kind of things. And so within a few years, I was getting the wedding cake bookings.
And so now, when did you set? How long had you been doing the cakes before you thought, okay, now I'm going to start teaching people this?
Well, the wedding cake sort of started kicking in around sort of 2019, 18, 19. So I was really, I'd sort of trained myself by then, was, putting out the marketing and all that, going to wedding fairs, things like that, and getting interest and getting customers. But it was at the beginning of 2020. I'd had quite a few weddings booked in for 2020. And then, of course, lockdown came and they were all postponed. Some of them were cancelled completely. Some of them were just postponed. So in the space of that 15-minute speech at the end of March by the then Prime Minister, I'd lost all my income because my supply teaching had gone as well. Mm-hmm. So I describe it somewhere as I allowed myself an hour to panic. And then I thought, well, panicking's a waste of energy. There's no point in panicking. I've got to get a plan together here. And luckily at the time, I was in, it was an online group for wedding industry suppliers. And they very quickly, they were really, on the ball. They put out some day conferences and brought in people like lawyers and things to talk to the suppliers about what to do about refunds, or all those kind of things.
Yeah.
And amongst those people was a lady that we know very well, Lisa Johnson. And she was talking about passive income, about using what you know to make money online, which is her big thing. And I listened to this. I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. That sounds just what I need. So, that's what I did. I did her course. I set up my Facebook group. I followed her, her teaching. And here I am 4 years later with it all making me a fair bit of money. So it's good.
And super grateful for that opportunity to learn all of that. And the timing was just perfect.
Yeah.
So
it was.
Let's look at what fears came up as you were building that. I mean, you're pretty resilient, we know that. But what fears came up? Were you like, did you feel like you had to be a bit braver, bolder, courage? What do you think you harnessed by setting up this online business that will ultimately help you with where you are now? What do you think you grew, if you know what I mean?
It was, I remember when she had her open cart selling the course that she was selling. And I think it closed on the Monday. And on the Sunday evening, I was sitting there thinking, shall I do it? Because I'd just got a tax rebate for one reason or another, which was enough money to buy the course. And I thought, do I do it? Do I do it? And I sat there for quite a long time. And, read about people that had done the course previously and all sorts. And I thought, this is a golden opportunity, Annie. If you don't do this, you're going to be, what are you going to do? What's the alternative? And it was a case of you've got to make it work. It's not a case of what if I do it and fail? That's not an option, because I know people have done it and have succeeded, so I can do it and succeed. So it was just a case of, right, well, I've got to have the intention there. It was quite scary pressing that button to sign up for it, knowing all that money was was going. But I did have a real resolute, this is right. This is going to work. I'm going to do this.
And I think this is a thread that you must have had for your whole life, but definitely in the time that you and I have known each other, this like very strong intentionality. So when you give yourself like a minute, an hour, not very long in some people's eyes, to make a decision, then the intentionality is backed, and then we're going, and then we're rolling, and then we very quickly pick up speed. That's what I love about you. So let's bring the listeners up to speed in what happened in April this year. Now that people know a bit of the background and know where your plan was to keep scaling, the baking business, that's kind of like how life was mapping out for you. And then April throws you a bit of a curved ball.
It did. Middle of April, found a lump in my breast. So I went to see the doctor, who said, oh yeah, that could be something. And lots of hospital appointments and scans and so on and so forth later. At the end of May, beginning of June, I was told I had grade 2 breast cancer, But at that point, it was, right, we're going to give you chemo, you're going to have surgery, radiotherapy. We'll, refer you to the right place at the hospital and they'll contact you regarding the chemo and all that. But in the meantime, we need you to have just a couple more scans just to make sure, So I went to have the other scans and I was waiting patiently for the hospital to contact me to say, right, your chemo is starting here. But instead I got a call from my oncologist's secretary saying, oh, he needs to see you tomorrow. Come in tomorrow. Because I'd had the scan the previous week. And I thought, ooh, this doesn't sound good, but, it is what it is. There's no point in panicking or worrying because that's a waste of energy. So I went along with my younger daughter because by that point I'd learned that you need to take people with you when you have hospital appointments for this kind of thing. It really, doing it on your own is difficult. Try and take someone with you. Yeah. And it was at that appointment on the 2nd of July, Tuesday, the 2nd of July, I'll never forget. He said, unfortunately, the PET scanner showed that the cancer has moved to your bones and we can't cure it. It's incurable. So it was at that point that the physical reaction of that was probably just a couple of seconds, but it felt a little bit longer. The heart dropping, feeling cold, not being able to hear for a split second.
The shock. Yeah.
The shock of it. But it was my daughter that cried. I've only actually cried once since that, but I'll tell you about that later if you like. But I was very much, okay, right, okay. And my daughter asked how long she got. And the oncologist was actually quite positive about that. He said, well, similar people in circumstances as yours, years, we're talking years here. So I thought, okay, no, that's good. If he'd said weeks, I'd have panicked. Probably. I say I probably panicked, but you don't know, do you? Unless it actually happens.
No.
Because if you'd asked me in January, what would you do if someone told you had incurable cancer? I'd have probably said, oh, I'll weep and wail and do it. But I didn't at all.
Exactly.
I was quite measured. I think I did say a very rude swear word, but I don't think he minded.
Well, I think that's kind of acceptable, isn't it? In that kind of situation. Absolutely. I think anybody delivering that kind of news to somebody, I think most people would have a reaction of sorts.
Yes. But I was really impressed with the oncologist. I mean, they're obviously trained to deliver this kind of news. It's not an easy job in that respect. But he was straight down the line, no fluff, no faffing about, just telling me exactly how it was, for which I'm obviously very grateful. And he then went on to say, okay, your treatment plan is now changed. You're not going to get chemo. You're not going to have surgery. You're not going to have radiotherapy. What we're going to do is put you on a cocktail of drugs, basically. And eventually you'll get an injection. I can't remember the name of the drug, but it's an injection which strengthens the bones. But he said you're going to have to get dental work. Check with your dentist to see if you need any dental work done first, because you can't have that treatment if you're needing dental work. Oh, it's all very complicated. So I said okay. So I went off and found a dentist, which was one of the tasks that I had to do. But my daughters and I spent about 3 days just spending time together. There was a lot of silence. There was lots of staring into the middle distance. And there was a lot of, we did joke about it. I was like, get me a cup of tea, I've got cancer kind of thing. We did make a light of it because that's what we do as a family. We are like that as a family. But the one thing that I did do on that Tuesday evening, we got home and we were all a bit polaxed, and my other daughter had joined us. And I said to my daughters, I don't think I can cope telling people this evening, but we need to tell people this evening. We need to tell family. I need to tell my close friends this evening. So what we decided to do was tell one person and delegate that person to tell others, which worked really well. So my daughter phoned my older brother and explained what was going on, and then he then told the rest of the family. And I contacted one of my best friends and said, would you pass this on to everyone else? So that made life a little bit easier in terms of letting people know. Because, my mum, for one, was like, oh, what, she'd have been, what happened at the doctor's? What happened at the doctor's? Because they all knew I was going. And then suddenly to not say anything would have made it even worse. So I needed to obviously let them know. But it was, we spent about 3 days in shock. But by the sort of end of the third day, the fourth day, was when I started thinking, okay, I've got to do something with this. I've got a power here that I can use.
Yeah.
I'm in a position where I can influence people and do some good with with the challenge that I've been given. So I started sort of making very draft plans in my head about the kinds of things, going to speaking events and speaking about, cancer awareness, things like that. And it was at that point that I then phoned our lovely friend, Nick Rowley, being a PR expert and being a very good friend of mine. And I explained what was happening. And she said, okay, yeah, first thing you've got to do is write a blog. Then we'll get a podcast up and running. And those things will get get the word out and get the awareness and get everything, the ball rolling. So within a couple of days, I'd written my first blog. And I've written quite a few of those now. And the podcast was launched on the 11th of October. So we've had 2 episodes of that now. And in that time, I've also been thinking about, fundraising. Originally, my thought was I could fundraise for a charity. Which charity? So there was all that conversation going on. But as time went on, I sort of thought, actually, well, perhaps I want to do my own. I want to leave a legacy. I want to create something that will, live on. I fully intend to live for at least 10 years because I'll be really cross if I don't. But, eventually when I'm no longer here, this thing will carry on in my name. And I love the thought of that. And I started thinking about my 2 girls. They were 20 and 23 at the time. They had their birthdays in August, so they're a year older now. But they were the ones that were coming to appointments with me. They were having to miss work to do things. They were sitting with me, when I was feeling, that I needed someone around, all those kind of things. And it occurred to me that actually, when I started looking into it, there aren't that many places where young adults can go for support. There are sort of general support places and lots of support for, children whose parents have cancer, which is, brilliant. Of course, that must happen. But nothing really for over 18. So between 18 and about 25. And of course, that's a really vulnerable age because they're just starting out in life. They might be starting their career. They might be at university. They don't quite understand how perhaps mortgages work or, all that kind of stuff. That they need a parent to help and explain. So, where we've ended up now is I'm going to be setting up. It's actually going to be a CIC rather than a charity. Although its aims will be very, very similar. But we're going to aim to support young adults emotionally, perhaps with counselling, that kind of thing, and financially when necessary, particularly if that young adult perhaps is on, universal credit and single parent, those kind of circumstances in particular. And we're also going to provide, set up events for young adults, whether they're in that situation or not, to come and be together, so that people that are in that situation can have like-minded friends and talk about their issues that they have together and that kind of thing. And the other thing that we're going to do that I thought about last weekend, actually, when we were together at the retreat. There was lovely Arif there who was talking about spas and spa days. And I thought, wouldn't it be lovely to be able to provide experiences for these young adults and their parents so that they've got a memory, So being able to send them all off for a spa day, wouldn't that be just lovely to have something to remember, when their parent eventually dies? So we're in the process of thinking of lots of opportunities for that as well. And perhaps setting it up, how Oxfam do, buy a goat for your loved one for Christmas. We're thinking in terms of, buy a spa day for someone for Christmas. So gifting days and experiences for people that otherwise won't get it, I know, it's lovely, isn't it? And my girls have been very instrumental of thinking up ideas, because obviously they're the age of the people that we're helping. And say I'm 57, nearly 58 now, and I might think of ideas, and they might go, "No, Mum, no, we don't want to do that." Because the best for little girls, their idea of fun might not be our idea of fun. But they're going to be fully involved in it.
Brilliant. Let's take a moment to just really allow the listeners to reflect on what you've said, because you and I can laugh and joke, and that's the way that we, we've always been like that, no matter what we're talking about. So it's just how we connect with each other and how your approach to life is. But some people may be listening to this, and I know I have a lot of listeners that are like this, that are massively empathic, and they might have tears running down their face, and they may really feel very attached to your story and your journey and everything like that. And I just want to say to those listeners that please follow Annie. All of the details will be underneath the podcast, so please go and listen to her podcast. It's called Chronicles of Hope. But also do take a lot of strength from Annie, because she is phenomenal. One of the strongest people I've ever met on so many levels. But I think it's really great to listen to people's story, no matter what they are, and realise that the story doesn't define the person. Annie hasn't changed any of the ways that she is. She's always been somebody that gets a strong intention and then takes action. She's just navigating a different situation at the moment, which she could, in one guise, allow to take ownership of her, but she's taking ownership of herself. And this is just a journey that she's been on that may be 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, who knows? But none of us know that anyway. It's just that Annie's in a place now where she can really share this wisdom, this journey, this perspective, and help these people that are of this age. I've got children in this age bracket, 18 to 25. You think that young children are like a challenge and everything, but 18 to 25, it's a different stage in life. It's like it's like another growth stage, definitely, in terms of independence. And if you're in that place and you're also handling something happening to a parent where you're flawed on so many levels, but you're also trying to be a support, there's a lot of emotions going on. And then, like Annie says, there's a financial and everything like that. So Annie's mission, we want to get as many people behind it. So once you've, as you've listened and you've tuned in and you've processed your own thoughts and emotions about what Annie's journey is, then please do an Annie. Let's just call it do an Annie, and get on board. Get on board. Get the intentions right and get yourself focused. And let's raise this CIC awareness for people who will really, really benefit when they are in a really emotional time in their life where they want to be the greatest support for their parent, and they need to have some support around themselves too.
Yes.
So,
thank you. Yes.
You're also welcome. Let's talk about the podcast and Chronicles of Hope. And let's talk about how that name came about. Let's talk about hope.
Yes. Do you know, I was writing a blog on this just yesterday. So, and I was thinking, why hope? Why did that it sort of floated to the top? It wasn't, I didn't sit down one day and think, right, what am I going to call it? It just it was just there all the time. And it sort of floated to the top of my thoughts, and it's there. It was just there, the Chronicles of Hope, because my blog I'd started as the Annie Bennett Chronicles. I love the word chronicles. It makes it sound all sort of mysterious and epic and oldie-worldy.
Yeah, I do. It's very Annie.
It is a bit, isn't it? A bit dramatic, yes. So I took the Chronicles thing and I thought, yes, it's got to be Chronicles, But yeah, the thought of hope just kept coming. And it just seemed a really good fit to call it the Chronicles of Hope, because as I've said a few times, if you haven't got hope, you're nowhere, are you? You've got to have that glimmer of hope that things will be all right, that things will be all right in the end, that good things will happen. And so that's sort of where we're going with it. Yes, come with us, we'll help you make good things happen. Because we're all about the optimism, we're all about the positive. Obviously, there's going to be times when things aren't so good, but I'm a real believer in getting the positive out of every situation, however bad it is. So it just fitted really nicely, the Chronicles of Hope, and the podcast I'll be talking about hope. So the guests that I will be having on, I'll be asking them about what hope means to them, and perhaps times in their lives when they've had hope or not had hope, and the consequences, and what their message of hope might be. So that's where we're going with that.
It's so powerful, Annie. Really is so powerful. So if you could reflect back to the Annie on that, was it 2nd of July, Tuesday, 2nd of July?
Yep.
If you could reflect back to her now, so people who are listening, we're just about to go into November 2024. So what's that, July, August, September, October, November? We're like 3 months, 4 months.
July, September, 4 months, yeah.
For people who are listening, we're actually just trying to work out how many months there are between the 2nd of July. We're both intellectual women, but that's a bit of a struggle this morning.
Isn't it funny how we have to use our fingers to do that?
I was trying to do it out of camera. But anyway, everybody can listen and find their own way of how long it is in that time. But if you could reflect back to that Annie then, the Annie that was in the 3-day cocoon with your daughters, and now the Annie now, who is, equally as close with your daughters, but you're on a very different trajectory. What's been your biggest growth piece?
Oh my word, that's an interesting question. I think it's given me, my diagnosis has given me a real big sense of purpose, the biggest sense of purpose that I've ever had. And as I said earlier, it's given me a power. I feel quite powerful with this, because it will open doors isn't quite the right phrase, but it will make people sit up and listen, and it has made people sit up and listen. And because I feel so productive, I feel so positive. It may be strange listening, someone with incurable cancer can feel really positive, but I really, really do, because I've got so much that I want to do, that I aim to achieve. And that sense of purpose I've not really had before. Yes, with the business, I had a sense of purpose with setting that up and making wedding cakes and things. But this is a whole different level. And I'm absolutely loving it. It must be said. I'm absolutely loving it.
And I think that came, Annie and I were both at a retreat where I was speaking at it, and I was talking about my pillars of health. And one of my pillars of health is hope. And one of the real deepest connections that Annie and I have together is this piece around really allowing yourself to anchor into your truest purpose, whatever it is, and own it from a real deep place, and surprise people with it and delight people with it and support people with it, but actually stand strong in it no matter what that might be. So this, like, to some people be like, what? But when Annie and I were having this conversation, you were saying, I feel really blessed. I was like, I totally get where you're coming from. Yeah. I totally understand, because you've unlocked, through whatever path, you've unlocked like your greatest purpose, which allows you to really, leave this fabulous legacy and support for, lifetimes to come, and brings your wonderful daughters on a journey of support as well for their lifetime and their lifetime to come. It's a wonderful ripple effect of everything that you do.
Yeah.
So what does Annie see for the future for you? Sorry, go on.
Oh, no, I was going to say, my daughters, their friends as well, who are obviously all the same age, it's really rippling out to them as well. And they're really taking it on board that this is aimed at them and their age group. And some actually are in the same position as Heather and Elfie as well. So, and they're fully behind everything that we're doing. So it's really lovely. Really lovely.
It's so good, Annie. You're like, it is so good. The ripple is going to be huge. I already feel the ripple. It's going to be fabulous. And anything that I can do to help with that ripple, I'm totally here for supporting you. So how do you see the future? Do you see yourself getting on more stages, more speaking, getting this podcast out? Yeah. What's the short-term plan for everybody that's listening? Is like, hey, I want to help Annie. Give a real pitch. Give a real sales pitch of how people can help you.
Okay. I'd love to speak. Yeah, I'd love to speak at events. In fact, I'm doing one in December with the lovely Emma Hine. But any of those, I'd love to speak at. On podcasts, I'd love to be podcast guest for anyone that thinks I would add to their podcast. So that's going to be the next few months. We're obviously going to be setting the CIC up. So once that is up and running, obviously I'm going to want to come out and tell people about that. So anything in the spring that anyone is organising, if you'd like me to come along, and even if I just do 15 minutes, this is what it's all about, and then later on next year, I'm going to be writing the book. That's going to be coming out.
So is the book going to be called Chronicles of Hope, or don't we know?
Yeah, probably. It all fits in, doesn't it?
It does, it does. But I love it.
Yeah, I mean, originally, and this is going to happen, but my original thought was I want to write a book about my story, but also of my mum, who had an amazing life. She was in London during the Blitz, and had lots of stories to tell about her experiences there. And we've got various other family members, particularly women, who are really strong. So it's a sort of where I came from kind of book, but also I'll lead into everything that's happening now. So it will be the tale of how Chronicles of Hope started, how the blog started, how the podcast started, all that kind of stuff. So it'll all be contained into one easy read.
Love it. And on that note, that's it. I definitely, please let people know when that comes out. Like I said, every which way you can contact Annie will be below the podcast show notes. please do connect with her there. And please do reach out if you've got something that you want to ask her, or if you've got a place where she can share this old pattern. The last question, because I've absolutely adored speaking to you, and we'll probably do another episode. I can feel it when your book comes out or when you're in a different place, say 6 months' time. We'll do another update episode, maybe get your daughters on. And the last question that I always ask people is about what is a book that you have read that has made an impact in your life. And it can be in any which way. It can be something that, brought joy, laughter, something that allowed you to see a different perspective. It can be on anything, but it's when you've read something and it's changed a perspective of how you see yourself or how you live life. Have you got one? I'm so excited to hear.
Yes, I have. When I was in my last few years of teaching, this new thing was coming into schools. Now, teachers are very wary of new things because they tend to sort of stay for a couple of years and then you're on to the next thing. So I was a bit wary about this. But once I read the book, it changed my perspective on anything. And it's this one. It's Carol Dweck's Mindset book.
Okay.
And it's the subheading is Changing the Way You Think to Fulfill Your Potential. And it's to do with research that she carried out, I think in the 90s, to do with fixed mindset and growth mindset. And the fact that, for example, if you tell a small child that they're clever, they'll say, oh, well, I'm clever, I don't have to work then, do I? Whereas if you tell a child, that's really good effort you've put in there, they'll be encouraged to put in more effort and achieve more. That's sort of the the idea of it. And it really is a book about anyone can achieve anything. And that's sort of my life mantra now.
And that's what you're doing. And that's the piece around a whole Chronicles of Hope, isn't it? Let's get some support for when you feel like you're in a place of despair, because there will be moments when there's not a piece that we're denying that, but actually when you lead with hope and when you can see the hope in all of the situations and have some solutions for the pieces that feel a little bit hopeless, then the hopeful gets more attention and more focus, and the hope kind of shines in its brightest way. I am so delighted to have had this conversation with you. I have so much love for you, and I have so much support in everything that you're doing. And it's, in your words, this has ignited something in you that has really allowed you to shine in all your brilliance in so many ways. And I'm just excited to be part of your journey and sharing it.
Thank you. It's been lovely chatting to you. I always love chatting to you anyway. So it's lovely to do it on your podcast.
You are so welcome. So thank you so much for your time, listeners. This is like a bumper episode because I knew it was going to be with Annie. I knew we were going to max out on our times. I said that before we started recording. I really hope that you have massively taken a lot from this episode. I feel like it's an episode to keep listening back to. It's one of those ones. But for now, take care, and I will see you on the next episode. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode. I hope that you're feeling energised, fearless and inspired to take action today to stand in your greatness. I share even more tools and resources on my I Dare to Leap email newsletter. By signing up, you not only get early access to the I Dare to Leap products and services, but you also get brand new podcast episodes delivered straight to your inbox every Monday, meaning you'll never miss your weekly dose of becoming fearless energy. Sign up now at www.idaretoleap.com/newsletter or click the link in the show notes below.